The vacuum of space absorbed sound, but not ambition. Kayla Wynn knew this better than most as she stood at rigid attention in the reception hall of the Intergalactic Combat Academy, situated on Moon Base Trinivir. The sprawling institution represented humanity's greatest achievement in interspecies cooperation since first contact in 2389. It was now 2457, and humans remained the newest and least trusted species in the coalition. Kayla was the only human in her cohort of 53 cadets. Her 5'7" frame was dwarfed by the towering reptilian Savik warriors, whose scaled bodies stretched nearly 8 feet tall. The crystalline lumina pulsed with inner light as they communicated silently among themselves, their translucent bodies refracting the harsh academy lighting. Insectoid Navari clicked their mandibles in what Kayla had learned was amusement, their compound eyes sweeping over her with unconcealed assessment. "State designation and species origin," commanded Sergeant Zoran, a battle-scarred Savak whose deep violet scales marked him as a veteran of the Seti Nebula conflict. His voice resonated through the chamber without need for amplification. One by one, the alien cadets responded with practiced precision. Each proclaimed their lineage, battle honors of their families, and technological enhancements they brought to the academy. When Zoran's yellow eyes fixed on Kayla, the room fell silent. "Cadet Kayla Wynn, human, Earth." Her voice was soft but carried clearly through the hall. She offered nothing more. Whispers rippled through the assembly. A tall Savak with crimson scales snorted. "Is that all? Human? No augments? No battle heritage?" Sergeant Zoran raised a clawed hand. "That will be sufficient, Cadet Verex." His eyes narrowed at Kayla. "Humans, always. Economical with their presentations." The word dripped with disdain rather than appreciation. Kayla maintained her stance, eyes forward, expression neutral. Inside, she recited her grandfather's mantra. "The quietest warrior sees the most opportunities." As the cadets were dismissed to their quarters, Kayla felt the weight of isolation settle around her, like a familiar cloak. She had expected this, prepared for it. Her small room was Spartan compared to the elaborate chambers allocated to the other species, but she required little. From a simple metal case, she withdrew a worn, leather-bound book, a relic of Earth, containing the collected wisdom of martial philosophers spanning 2,000 years of human history. That night, as the triple moons of Trinivir cast silver shadows across the training grounds, Kayla moved through ancient forms in perfect silence. Her movements were precise, molecular level accurate, each muscle engaged with absolute control. She had trained this way since childhood, under her grandfather's watchful eye. General Artan Wynn had been humanity's representative during the Coalition Treaty signing, and his lessons were etched into her very DNA. "The human practices primitive movements," came a voice from the shadows. Kayla completed her form before acknowledging the speaker, an insectoid Navari whose carapace shimmered midnight blue in the moonlight. "I am Kalen." The Navari introduced himself. "Your species lacks natural weapons or defensive structures. Why do you not utilize enhancement technology like other humans?" Kayla reached for a towel. "Enhancement masks weakness. I prefer to eliminate weakness." Kalen's antennae twitched in what might have been confusion or interest. "An unusual philosophy. Most would say efficiency is paramount. Most confuse efficiency with shortcuts." Kayla replied. She gathered her things, bowed slightly to the Navari, and returned to her quarters. Morning brought the first physical assessment. The training dome's gravity had been adjusted to 1.5 Earth standard, comfortable for most species, challenging for humans. Kayla watched as her fellow cadets demonstrated their capabilities. The Savak warriors pulverized targeting drones with combination attacks. Lumina crystallines phased through assault courses by altering their molecular density. Navari insectoids performed impossible acrobatics with their multi-jointed limbs. When Kayla's turn came, Sergeant Zoran's expression made his expectations clear. Cadet Win, standard human assessment protocol. His tone suggested he anticipated disappointment. Verex, the crimson-scaled Savak who had questioned her earlier, leaned toward his companions. Watch how slowly they move without augments, like swimming through nutrient gel. Kayla approached the obstacle course. Unlike her peers, she carried no weapons, wore no tactical gear beyond the standard academy uniform. As the signal sounded, she moved. What followed was not the explosive display of her classmates. Instead, Kayla flowed through the course with economical precision. She didn't overpower the obstacles. She navigated them with minimal energy expenditure. When attack drones activated, she didn't destroy them, but redirected their momentum, using their own force against them. Her breathing never accelerated beyond meditative rhythm. She completed the course with a respectable time, not the fastest, but far from the slowest. As she rejoined the group, Sergeant Zoran's expression remained unreadable. Adequate. Cadet Win. Barely. He turned to address the group. Survival skills assessment tomorrow at 0600. Dismissed. As the cadets dispersed, a crystalline lumina approached her. Its body pulsed with muted blue light. I am Lycerin. It communicated, its thoughts translating to Kayla's academy neural implant, the only technology she had accepted. Your movement patterns are unusual. You avoid paths of maximum efficiency. I choose paths of sustainable efficiency, Kayla corrected gently. Explain the difference, Lycerin requested, light patterns shifting with curiosity. Maximum efficiency often creates vulnerability. Sustainable efficiency preserves strength for when it's truly needed. Lycerin's light dimmed in contemplation. An interesting theory. I will observe its application. That evening, Kayla once again trained alone, unaware that her silent practice was now watched by several pairs of eyes. The following weeks established a pattern. In every assessment, Kayla performed competently but never spectacularly. She spoke only when necessary, trained alone, and maintained her distance from the social hierarchies forming among the cadets. Verex and his circle of followers made her a frequent target of their mockery, but she never reacted. The human doesn't respond because she can't, Verex proclaimed loudly during tactical studies. Their species lacks the cognitive capacity to formulate appropriate comebacks. Sergeant Zoran, overseeing the class, didn't reprimand Verex for the outburst. Instead, his gaze lingered on Kayla, something unreadable passing through his reptilian eyes. After 40 days of basic training, the Academy announced the Zareth 9 survival test, a grueling 3-day exercise on a hostile moon known for its extreme weather, dangerous terrain, and predatory fauna. Cadets would be dropped in pairs at various locations and required to reach an extraction point while overcoming environmental and simulated combat challenges. When assignments were posted, Kayla found herself unpaired, the odd cadet out. Cadet Win will operate solo, Sergeant Zoran announced. As humans often find themselves without allies in combat situations. The statement was delivered as fact rather than insult, but the implication was clear. The equipment requisition period revealed another stark difference in approach. While most cadets selected advanced weaponry, environmental shields, and tactical augments, Kayla chose only basic survival gear, a thermal blanket, water purifier, medical kit, and a simple carbon fiber utility knife. "Is that all you're taking, human?" Verex asked incredulously as they exited the supply depot. "The Thornax will use your bones as toothpicks." Kayla secured her pack. "I'll manage. Your funeral ceremony will be brief. At least." Verex replied with a sneer. The morning of deployment arrived with military precision. Transport shuttles carried the cadets to low orbit above Zareth 9, a churning cauldron of a moon with atmosphere-piercing volcanoes, sulfuric acid lakes, and vast stretches of razor-sharp obsidian fields. Each pair of cadets would be dropped at predetermined coordinates, with Solo Kayla assigned to the most difficult starting point, the edge of the northern volcanic range. As she secured herself in the drop pod, Sergeant Zoran approached for final inspection. "Your strategy." "Cadet Wynn?" he asked, checking her minimal equipment with barely concealed skepticism. "Observe, adapt, proceed." Kayla's response was characteristic in its brevity. Zoran's scaled brow furrowed. "Most cadets have mapped detailed routes and contingencies. Most terrains don't respect plans," she replied. Something like amusement flickered across the sergeant's face before he stepped back. "Safe landing, Cadet. If you reach the extraction point, I'll be surprised." The drop was violent, but controlled. Kayla's pod screamed through Zareth 9's toxic upper atmosphere, heat shields glowing orange against the punishment. With a bone-jarring impact, she landed on the black glass surface of the volcanic foothills. The moment her boots touched the ground, Kayla centered herself. The air was barely breathable, thin and laced with sulfur compounds. The gravity pulled at her limbs with 1.2 times Earth's force. In the distance, geysers of molten rock punctuated the horizon. She consulted her positioning unit. The extraction point lay 87 kilometers southeast, across the shattered plains and through the Mist Canyon. Most cadets would choose the direct route, expecting to overcome whatever lay between with superior firepower and technology. Kayla chose otherwise. She began a southeastern path but skirted the plains, following the elevated ridge of a long dormant lava flow. The route was longer but offered better visibility and fewer hiding places for predators. She moved at a steady pace, conserving energy, her breathing controlled and shallow to minimize toxin intake. By nightfall, she had covered 18 kilometers, slower than most would manage, but she arrived at her self-selected campsite without incident or exhaustion. As she prepared to rest beneath an overhanging rock formation, her comm unit crackled with an emergency signal. "Repeat, emergency extraction required. Coordinates attached. Cadet down. Severe." The transmission cut off abruptly. Kayla checked the location. 2 cadets were approximately 3 kilometers west of her position, in the heart of the shattered plains she had deliberately avoided. Their emergency beacon pulsed weakly. She had no obligation to assist. The test parameters explicitly stated that cadets were to prioritize their own survival and completion objectives. Rescue operations were not part of the assessment. Kayla secured her minimal camp and set out immediately. The plains were treacherous. Obsidian shards that could slice through standard boot material protruded at chaotic angles. In the darkness, navigation required perfect attention. Kayla moved silently, each step precisely placed. She located the source of the distress call within 40 minutes. Alumina crystalline, she recognized Lycerin's distinctive light pattern, crouched defensively beside an unconscious Navari. The insectoid's carapace was cracked, blue ichor seeping from multiple wounds. "Carvon Strider," Lycerin communicated, light pulses rapid with distress. "Ambushed us from below, severed our communications after initial distress call." Kayla surveyed the situation. The Carvon Strider, a six-limbed predator adapted to the glass plains, circled at approximately 50 meters distance. Its transparent body made it nearly invisible against the obsidian, but Kayla tracked the subtle distortions of light around its movement. "Can you move him?" she asked, nodding toward the injured Navari. "Negative. My phase shifting cannot extend to his mass in this gravitational field." Kayla nodded once. "When I engage the Strider, apply pressure compression to those wounds." She pointed to the most serious injuries. "Use your crystalline structure to stabilize the fractures." Before Lycerin could object, Kayla moved away from the makeshift shelter. The Strider immediately reoriented toward her. Sensing the isolated prey, Kayla stood motionless, centered in her breathing. The Strider accelerated, its glass-like limbs clacking against the obsidian surface. At the last possible moment, when the creature launched itself toward her, Kayla pivoted with molecular precision. The Strider's momentum carried it past her, but one razor-sharp limb sliced across her upper arm, drawing a thin line of crimson. As the creature skidded to reorient itself, Kayla moved in perfect counterpoint. She didn't attack. Instead, she positioned herself repeatedly to use the Strider's own mass and momentum against it. Each time it lunged, she redirected its force toward the hazardous terrain. After the third attack, one of the creature's limbs shattered against an obsidian spike. Wounded and confused by prey that refused to behave as expected, the Strider retreated, vanishing into the darkness of the plains. Kayla returned to Lycerin and the injured Navari, her breathing only slightly elevated. Blood trickled down her arm, but she ignored it as she knelt beside the insectoid. "The wounds are serious, but not fatal," she assessed. "He needs stabilization for transport." Working together, they created a crude stretcher from Kayla's thermal blanket and pieces of the broken emergency beacon. By morning, they had transported the injured Navari to Kayla's safer camp in the foothills. "Your assistance was unexpected," Lycerin communicated as they treated the Navari's wounds. "Protocol indicates solo cadets should prioritize their own extraction. Protocol serves strategy." Kayla replied, "Strategy serves purpose." "And your purpose diverged from protocol," Lycerin observed, its light pattern suggesting newfound respect. "Sometimes," Kayla finished bandaging the worst of the injuries, "he'll recover consciousness soon. You should continue to the extraction point together once he's stable." "You're not staying with us?" Lycerin's lights pulsed with surprise. "Three moving together make a louder target than two," she said simply, "and I have my own path." Before dawn of the second day, Kayla departed, leaving additional supplies with the recovering pair. She adjusted her route to account for the delay, choosing a more direct path that would take her through the western edge of the Mist Canyon. As she navigated the increasingly difficult terrain, the sky darkened ominously. The Academy briefings had warned of ash storms, microscopic volcanic glass suspended in hurricane-force winds. Kayla identified a deep crevice in the canyon wall and wedged herself into it moments before the storm hit. For 6 hours, the world outside her shelter ceased to exist, replaced by an impenetrable wall of swirling obsidian particles that would have flayed exposed skin from bone. In her protected space, Kayla practiced mental forms, visualizing each movement with the same precision she would use to execute them physically. When the storm finally passed, she emerged to a transformed landscape. The ash had reconfigured the terrain, covering her planned route with treacherous drifts of razor-sharp particles. The extraction point remained 43 kilometers distant, with less than 36 hours remaining. Kayla reassessed. The direct path was now impassable. The long route around the canyon would take too much time. The only viable option was to cross the canyon's central region, the Molten Lands, where the ground itself remained semi-fluid from constant volcanic activity. She began her descent into the canyon as the first of Zereth 9's 3 suns crested the horizon. The heat increased with every meter of elevation loss. By mid-morning, the air shimmered around her, and sweat evaporated instantly from her skin. Dehydration became her primary concern. Other cadets would have relied on environmental shields or cooling units. Kayla had only her discipline. She regulated her breathing to minimize moisture loss and moved during the cooler periods when at least one sun dipped below the canyon walls. During the brutal triple sun zenith, she found shelter and entered a meditative state that lowered her core temperature and metabolic needs. As she navigated a particularly treacherous section where the ground bubbled with molten stone just beneath a thin crust, Kayla began to hum quietly. It was an ancient earth melody her grandfather had taught her, a battle hymn from a war fought with gunpowder and steel, centuries before humanity reached the stars. The simple tune became her mental anchor as fatigue and heat threatened her focus. By nightfall of the second day, she had crossed the Molten Lands and begun the ascent up the eastern canyon wall. Her water was nearly depleted, her rations half consumed. The extraction point lay 20 kilometers ahead, challenging but achievable in the time remaining. Kayla established a minimalist camp on a stable outcropping. As she prepared to rest, her enhanced hearing detected movement below. Carefully peering over the edge, she spotted a group of 4 cadets, 2 Savak, including Verex, and 2 Navari, making their way through the canyon floor. They had chosen the technological approach, their environmental shields glowing as they pushed through the superheated terrain. She observed silently as they argued among themselves, their formation sloppy from exhaustion and frayed nerves. When they finally settled for the night several hundred meters below her position, their perimeter sensors were hastily deployed, leaving a significant blind spot to the north. Kayla could have called out a warning. Instead, she watched as a massive shadow detached itself from the darkness and approached their camp. The Thornak, an apex predator of Zereth 9, moved with surprising stealth for a creature weighing approximately 400 kilograms. Its armored hide absorbed light, and 6 muscular limbs ended in hooked claws designed to disembowel prey. The cadet's perimeter alarm activated too late. The Thornak was already among them, its initial attack scattering their formation. Verex and 1 Navari managed to deploy energy weapons, but their panicked shots mostly reflected harmlessly off the creature's natural armor. Kayla moved without conscious decision. She descended the cliff face with controlled rapid movements, silent until she was within 20 meters of the chaotic battle. Formation Delta 6. She called out sharply. Verex, left flank. Navari, elevation. Surprisingly, the cadets responded to her authoritative tone. Verex repositioned as directed, providing covering fire while the Navari used their jumping ability to gain higher ground. The remaining Savak, though injured, maintained a defensive position. The Thornak, momentarily confused by the sudden organization of its prey, hesitated. Kayla used that split second to advance, drawing the creature's attention. Targeting Protocol 7, she ordered. Limb joints and sensory organs only. The coordinated fire from 3 positions struck the Thornak's more vulnerable areas. It roared in pain and fury, turning its full attention to Kayla, the smallest and apparently weakest target. As it charged, Kayla stood her ground until the last possible moment. Then, with movement too quick for most eyes to track, she sidestepped, allowing the creature's momentum to carry it past her. As it turned for another attack, the continued precision fire from the other cadets further enraged and disoriented it. The battle lasted nearly 10 minutes, an eternity in combat time, when the Thornak finally retreated, bleeding from multiple wounds but still very much alive. The cadets collapsed in exhaustion. "Your intervention was timely," Verex admitted grudgingly, clutching a deep gash in his scaled arm. Kayla nodded once, already assessing his injury. "The wound needs compression and antiseptic." She removed supplies from her pack. Thornak claws carry bacterial agents. As she treated the Savak's injuries, the others watched with varying degrees of astonishment. "You could have let it kill us," one Navari said, mandibles clicking in agitation. "Our failure would have improved your ranking." "Rankings are arbitrary. Survival isn't." Kayla finished bandaging Verex's arm. "Can you continue to the extraction point?" The group exchanged glances. "Yes," Verex answered for them all, "though our pace will be slower. Then we should move. Dawn approaches, and the canyon predators are most active at first light." The unlikely group traveled together through the night, though none spoke of it directly. A shift had occurred. The constant commentary about Kayla's human limitations ceased, when they rested briefly before the final push. Verex approached her as she scanned the horizon. "You fight differently," he observed. "No wasted energy, no unnecessary movement." Kayla nodded, accepting the assessment without comment. "Your species lacks natural weapons." Verex continued, "Yet you face the Thornak without hesitation. Natural weapons often lead to over-reliance." She replied, "Versatility is more valuable than specialized advantage." Verex considered this, his reptilian features unreadable. "An interesting perspective," he finally said. "Perhaps there is wisdom in it." By mid-morning of the third day, their combined group reached the base of the plateau where the extraction point awaited. The final ascent, a near vertical climb of 300 meters, would test their remaining strength. As they began the climb, Kayla noticed one of the Navari struggling, its injured carapace limiting mobility. Without comment, she positioned herself below the insectoid, providing support at critical junctures. The others observed but said nothing. Halfway up the cliff face, disaster struck. A section of weathered rock crumbled beneath the injured Navari's grip. The insectoid plummeted, smashing against an outcropping before Kayla managed to catch its weight with one arm, her other hand maintaining a precarious hold on the cliff. For a moment, they hung suspended, Kayla's muscles straining against gravity and the Navari's substantial mass. Then, with precise redistribution of force, she swung the injured cadet toward a stable ledge 2 meters away. "Impossible," breathed Verex, who had witnessed the rescue from above. "Human musculature cannot support that load." Kayla didn't respond, focusing instead on completing her own climb with methodical precision. When they finally reached the extraction plateau, they discovered they were among the first arrivals. Only 3 other pairs of cadets had reached the checkpoint ahead of them. More surprisingly, Lycerin and the injured Navari from the first night were among those waiting. "Your guidance proved accurate," Lycerin communicated when Kayla approached. "We reached the extraction point with minimal further incident." Before Kayla could respond, movement at the plateau's edge caught her attention. A second Thornak, larger than the one they had encountered below, had followed the scent of blood and injury to the gathering of potential prey. The already exhausted cadets scrambled for defensive positions, but fatigue made their reactions slow. The Thornak charged toward the most vulnerable target, the injured Navari that Lycerin had helped to the extraction point. Without hesitation, Kayla moved to intercept. As the massive predator bore down on her, she did not evade as before. Instead, she stepped directly into its path, absorbing the initial impact with her shoulder and hip in perfect alignment. What happened next would become Academy legend. Using the creature's own momentum and a precisely calculated pivot point, Kayla redirected its forward energy upward. For a suspended moment, the 400-kilogram beast seemed to hang in the air above her. Then, with a controlled torque that engaged every muscle in her body in perfect sequence, she flipped the Thornac completely over her shoulder. The creature crashed onto its back with an impact that shook the plateau. Before it could recover, precision fire from the now organized cadets drove it back over the cliff edge. Silence fell across the extraction point. Every cadet and instructor stared at the slight human female who stood calmly at the cliff edge, her breathing returning to normal rhythm within seconds. Sergeant Zoran stepped forward from the observation post where he had been monitoring final approaches. His yellow eyes fixed on Kayla with an intensity that would have made most cadets flinch. "Explain," he demanded simply. Kayla met his gaze. Leverage and momentum conversion. The creature's mass became its vulnerability. No human should be capable of that maneuver. Zoran stated, "The torque requirements exceed baseline human musculature capacity by at least 300%. Baseline assumes average development." Kayla replied, "I am not average." Something shifted in Zoran's reptilian features, a reassessment written in the subtle movements of scaled facial muscles. "No," he agreed slowly. "You are not." The extraction shuttle arrived as scheduled, descending through Zareth 9's turbulent atmosphere with practiced precision. As the cadets boarded, Sergeant Zoran reviewed footage captured by monitoring drones throughout the exercise. "Cadet win," he called out as she prepared to board. A moment. Kayla stepped aside, standing at attention as the others filed past. "Your performance requires context," Zoran stated when they were relatively isolated. "You deliberately underperformed in academy assessments." It wasn't a question, but Kayla nodded once in acknowledgement. "Explain your strategy," he commanded. "Observation before revelation," she replied. "I needed to understand the environment and its biases." Zoran's scaled brow lifted slightly. "And what biases did you identify?" "Cadet. Assumption of human inferiority based on visible characteristics rather than demonstrated capability." The sergeant was silent for a long moment. "Your surname, Wynn." It seemed familiar from the initial roster. His eyes narrowed. "General Artan Wynn, Coalition Treaty Negotiator. You are related." "His granddaughter." Understanding dawned in Zoran's expression. "The silent tactician of Terra, your grandfather's reputation among Coalition forces is significant." His lessons were thorough. Kayla acknowledged. "Why did you not declare this connection? It would have altered initial perceptions considerably. Perception should be earned through action, not borrowed from ancestry." Zoran studied her with newfound interest. "An unusual philosophy in Coalition circles, but not an invalid one," Kayla replied evenly. "No," Zoran agreed. "Not invalid at all." He gestured toward the waiting shuttle. "Your assessment on Zareth 9 has been educational. Cadet win, for all concerned." The return journey to Trinivir was subdued. Most cadets were too exhausted for conversation, but the silence that surrounded Kayla had transformed from isolation to something approaching respect. Verex, seated across from her, studied her with open curiosity rather than disdain. When they landed at the academy, Sergeant Zoran made an unexpected announcement. "Special assembly at 0800 tomorrow. Attendance mandatory for all cadets and instructional staff." Speculation ran wild through the barracks that night, but Kayla maintained her routine. She treated her minor injuries, performed her evening meditation, and reviewed the lessons of the past 3 days with clinical detachment. The assembly hall was filled to capacity the following morning. Academy Commander Tholas, a venerable Lumina whose crystalline form had witnessed 3 centuries of coalition military history, presided from the central dais. Sergeant Zoran stood at attention beside him, along with the other training officers. Zareth 9 assessments have been processed, Commander Tholas announced, his translated thoughts resonating through the neural implants of all present. Rankings will be posted to individual terminals by midday. The commander's light patterns shifted to what Kayla had come to recognize as a formal announcement configuration. However, one cadet's performance requires immediate acknowledgement. Cadet Kayla Wynn, present yourself. Whispers erupted throughout the hall as Kayla moved forward with measured steps. Your approach to the assessment was unorthodox, Commander Tholas stated. Sergeant Zoran's analysis indicates you deliberately operated below capacity during standard academy training. Kayla remained at attention, expression neutral. Explain this strategy. The commander directed. Battlefield advantage relies on accurate opponent assessment. Kayla replied. Revealing full capability prematurely surrenders informational superiority. A ripple of surprise moved through the assembled officers. The words were straight from General Artan Wynn's famous tactical treatise, recognized by all senior coalition commanders. Commander Tholas's crystalline structure pulsed with what might have been approval. Sergeant Zoran has submitted footage of your final confrontation on the extraction plateau. The maneuvering of a 400-kilogram apex predator by unaugmented human musculature was unexpected. Traditional human martial disciplines focus on redirecting force rather than matching it. Kayla explained. The technique requires precision, not strength. Yet the precision displayed exceeds standard human neurological parameters, countered a Navari instructor from the sidelines. Standard parameters assume standard training. Kayla responded, My training began at age 3 under General Wynn's direct supervision. The revelation sent another wave of murmurs through the assembly. General Artan Wynn's reputation as the architect of humanity's most significant military victories was well established in coalition histories. Commander Tholas raised a crystalline appendage for silence. Cadet Wynn's performance on Zareth 9 demonstrated exceptional tactical awareness, interdisciplinary cooperation, and combat capability. Furthermore, her rescue of fellow cadets at personal risk reflects the highest traditions of coalition service. The commander's form shifted, emitting a brighter light pattern. By authority of Central Command Directive 7-74, I hereby approve early commissioning. Lieutenant Kayla Wynn, you are assigned to Frontline Diplomatic Security Unit 47, effective immediately following graduation ceremonies. Stunned silence fell across the hall. Early commissioning was virtually unheard of, especially for first-year cadets. Assignment to a diplomatic security unit, the elite forces responsible for protecting coalition negotiators in hostile territories, was considered among the most prestigious postings available. Sergeant Zoran stepped forward, presenting Kayla with the distinctive insignia of her new rank. Lieutenant Wynn, he acknowledged formally, but with a new note in his voice that might have been respect. As she accepted the insignia, Kayla finally broke her characteristic reserve. Permission to address the assembly. Commander? Tholas indicated assent with a light pulse. Kayla turned to face her fellow cadets. Strength isn't measured by who shouts loudest or strikes hardest, she said, her quiet voice carrying clearly through the silent hall. True power lies in disciplined intent, knowing not just how to act, but when and why. Her gaze swept across the faces, scaled, crystalline, insectoid, and others, that had initially dismissed her. Coalition strength comes not from making every species the same, but from understanding what makes each unique. I look forward to serving alongside all who share that understanding. As she resumed her position, something unprecedented occurred. It began with Lissarin, whose crystalline body shifted to emit a specific frequency recognized throughout the coalition as a salute of highest respect. Kalin and the other Navari followed, their antennae positioning in formal acknowledgement. Even Verex and his Savak companions raised their scaled arms in the traditional warrior's recognition. In that moment, surrounded by the acknowledgement of beings who had once dismissed her very existence, Kayla Wynn maintained her characteristic composure, but those closest to her might have detected the smallest of smiles, a brief acknowledgement that sometimes the quietest voice carries the furthest when it finally chooses to speak. The legend of the human cadet who threw a 400-kilogram beast would spread throughout coalition training academies in the years that followed. But for Kayla, it was simply the first step in a journey her grandfather had prepared her for since childhood, proving that humanity's greatest strength lay not in technology or physical power, but in the disciplined mind and spirit that had carried the species from ancient battlefields on Earth to the stars beyond.